right, Shabbat Shalom, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started here. All of you should have a source sheet in front of you. If you don't, here, let's see. Does anybody not have a source sheet? Okay, great. So as you can see, we have a little bit of a different setup here. We have this beautiful new bima, this beautiful new shulchan. And as a result, we're sort of figuring out, at least I can speak for myself, I'm figuring out where to put things and how to organize everything. But you may notice that right now we don't have the little hand mic. So I typically during these shiurim, we ask participants if you're comfortable with it to sort of like give your answer to questions into the microphone. But since we don't have that right now, what I'm going to go ahead and do is do a lot of reflecting back of what folks are saying for the benefit of people on Zoom and later on the podcasts, the many podcasts that Norm so wonderfully puts all of these classes and sermons on. And great. So as you can see, you have the source sheet in front of you, and the class is called How Good It Should Be to Dwell Together. So I'm starting here at the top with the first source with a pasuk, a verse from Breshit, actually, because I don't know about you, but I feeling the sense of whiplash with how quickly we're already going through the book of Genesis, the book of Breshit, and I wanted to sort of take a step back and slow it down a little bit, and see if we can look at give some of our more fundamental stories just a little bit more airtime. Can I get a volunteer? Actually, no, I'm just going to read the first verse in English, and then we'll ask some questions. So right at the top of the page there, God said, "It is not good for the human to be alone. I will make a fitting counterpart for him. Vayomer Adonai Elohim lo tov heyot ha'adam levado, e'aseh lo ezer kenegdo." So what is this in reference to? Creation of Chava, creation of women. The creation of Adam's partner, the first person. Great. What else is going on around this story?
Well, it's funny because in that text it says we'll make him a fitting helper, and then it goes on to describe all the other living beings
right.
God is creating, right?
Yeah. So what Diego is referring to is this parade of that happens during creation when Adam is already created. Now everything has been created at this point, except for Chava, except for Eve, as we translate in English. And then God says, it's not good for a person to be by themselves, so let me try to find Adam a fitting help, or a fitting Ezer Kenegdo. So God marches these animals in front of Adam, and Adam's like, no, not this one, no, not this one, no, not this one. And you can sort of imagine this parade of like, how about an elephant? No. How about a donkey? No. How about a parakeet? It's like, absolutely not. And then finally, God sort of, in a way, realizes, oh, maybe Adam needs to be with someone who's a little bit more like himself. And so, and of course, the story goes, as a lot of us understand it, and the rabbis understand it, that a deep sleep falls upon Adam, and God takes out a rib from Adam and forms that into Chava, into Eve, and then boom, suddenly you have two human beings. Great. So let's look at the next source, the Ibn Ezra commentary on this verse. So Ibn Ezra, one of my favorite commentators, great medieval commentator. Typically, he has these very short comments that are grammatically based, which if you're a language nerd or language lover like myself, and I know a number of people in this room, can be very helpful. So this is a little bit more of a kind of I would say a pragmatic read, which is how he sort of does things, more like what's going on here in actuality. Can I have someone just read in the English what Ibn Ezra says? So he's commenting on the Ezer Kenegdo, the helpmeet. Does anybody want to read the English? Yeah, go ahead.
A helpmeet should be understood in the light of two are better than one.
Great. A helpmeet should be understood in the light of two are better than one. It's a pretty universal adage. Two heads are better than one. It's better not to do things alone. Or if you've ever I've ever gotten anything from IKEA, oftentimes it'll say like, oh, this is a team lift. You know, you should get somebody to lift this for you so you don't throw out your back like I definitely have done in the past. So this seems like a very basic and evident sort of notion. But I want us to sort of spend some time here and talk about why it's good for someone to not be alone. Or maybe I can ask the question more in the positive. Why should we be with other people? If you want to just take a second to think about it, and then go ahead and just raise your hands and I'll call on you. And again, reflect back the answers for the technological aspect of things.
It's lonely to be by yourself.
So Irv is saying it's lonely to be by yourself, right? Yeah?
We're flawed in different ways and at different times. So someone else might be complementary, but also even if we were up to the task today, maybe in a week we might need someone to help carry the load as we go through a load.
Okay, so it's in a way, if I can just, so it's good to have someone who could complement us, but also help us on those moments when we just can't do things by ourselves. Is that more or less what you're saying? Yeah, I think that's great. You know, we often think about, you know, matches with friendships, matches with couples, how it works, how it doesn't work. And in any relationship, there are definitely those moments where you're like, I got it. I can carry the torch for us today. And the next day it's like, all right, it's your turn. I can't. I'm exhausted. You know? Great. What else? Why else is it good to be with people? Yeah, Joey.
Teamwork makes the dream work.
Teamwork makes the dream work. Yeah, there's that team lift idea coming back in. Hi. Can you say a little bit more about that, though?
Well, let's see. Because sometimes it can be boring to be alone.
It would be boring to be alone. That's actually really that's a great statement too. It would be boring to be alone. Yeah.
Well, you have a lot of time on your hands and nobody to spend it with.
A lot of time on your hands and no one to spend it with.
Somebody to spend the time with.
Right.
So you don't be alone.
Right.
And you don't be miserable.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Right. There's this. The first thing that comes to mind is the classic person on a stranded desert island, and the questions of like, well, if you could eat one food on that desert island, what would it be? Or one book, and then of course the other question is, if you could spend the rest of your life on this desert island with a single person, who would it be? Which is a big question because
I would be with this guy.
yeah, that's great. It's beautiful. But yeah, teamwork makes the dream work, and it can be lonely being by oneself. Any other ideas? Again, I want to just dig into this a little bit more just to see what else. What are the reflections? So the question again is, why is it good to be with other people? Why is it good to not be alone?
Because you can help one another, and you can get the job done if you're at work, and you and your coworker work as a team. You get the job done.
Right, you can work together and sort of become, through working together, really get to know how the other person works, how the people work, what their strengths are, maybe what some of the weaknesses are. Exactly.
What are their beliefs?
What are their beliefs? And in a way, there's if you've ever worked on a team or, you know, sung in a choir or danced in a dance troupe or played in a team sport, you learn that when you're working with a group of people, doing something towards a common goal, oftentimes in varying levels of synchrony, there's actually this like natural human sort of gelling that happens where you almost become one unit. It's really really beautiful. I can just speaking to experiences when I was in high school in show choir when we were singing and dancing. It's very, very cheesy, but I loved it. And a lot of people do, so I don't want to knock it too much. But we would do these breathing exercises where we would all breathe together, right? And at first it sounds like, oh, all right, is this like a meditation? What is it? But it's so we're actually tuning our bodies to one another, right? So then we actually do become a kind of single unit. I remember doing this in a choir in college as well, because when you're singing any kind of choral work, you're not only are you making notes about like cutoffs, like where the phrase should end, but specifically like where you should take a breath and when you should take a breath. There's this thing called staggered breathing in choral work, which is very much, it requires many people. It could be that, you know, the sopranos can hold out this really long, well, half the sopranos can hold out this really long note and the other half can't, right? So the half that can holds it out and the other ones take maybe a breath a third of the way through. and then hold the last third. Whereas the other sopranos maybe take a breath 2/3 of the way through, and then sing the last third. So it's as if it's one wall of sound, one voice. And so you have this cohesion that happens, which I think is just so beautiful on so many levels, which brings us to this next source from Breshit Rabbah. So Breshit Rabbah is it's a Talmudic era midrash on the book of Breshit and the book of Genesis. Excuse me, should drink a little bit of water here. And I would love if I could just have a volunteer read in the English for us here. Yeah, Joey, thank you.
Rabbi Yirmiyah ben Elazar said, when the Holy One, blessed be God, created Adam the first man, God created him androgynous. That is what is written. God created them male and female. Rabbi Shmuel ben Nachman said, when the Holy One, blessed be God, created Adam the first man, God created him with two faces, and subsequently God sawed him in two and made for him two backs, a back here and a back there.
So pause, thank you. So we have this image of sort of the first person actually not just being Adam, right? We have this idea of Adam HaRishon, which means the first person. And in this sort of interpretation of what that meant, who that person was, excuse me, Rabbi Shmuel ben Bar Nachman says that actually, if we can picture it, like it was, just for lack of a better term, Adam and Eve, right? But as like one human being with their backs almost joined, almost like conjoined twins. And that's how they created. And that's, in a way, what you're saying when he uses the word androgynous in the Hebrew here. It's actually a Greek word. You'll find a lot of Greek words, especially in the Midrash and also in the Talmud in places, which is very interesting. But androgynous, which we translate as androgynous, meaning that it has both, this being has characteristics that are interpreted as both male and female, however we may interpret that. And there's this thing happens, right, where actually before I go on, I'm just so curious, how does this image sit with you? Like, what is it? Is this something you've heard before? Is this something you haven't heard before? Like, what do you make of this? Yeah, please.
Something similar appears in Plato.
Oh, interesting. Say more.
The character Aristophanes has a similar idea. They're trying to answer where does love come from. And it says, well, back in the prehistoric times, there were these beings with 4 arms and 4 legs, and you would be male and female, or male and male, or female and female, and then you were split into 2. So love is the longing for your other half.
Oh, that is so beautiful. So we're just told that there's a similar idea in the works of Plato by, is this Aristophanes is saying this? So Aristophanes saying that a similar story, that we're created as these creatures with 4 legs, which would be very much like this particular creature that we're imagining, and then he is split into 2, and the result of that splitting is the answer to the question of where does love come from, and the love is the desire to be joined together again. Is that right? Right. And which is so interesting. It's a sort of Greek idea, and then here we see it even with the Greek word androgynous in our own midrashic text. That's really, really remarkable. Thank you. Yeah, Joey.
Can we continue? Or tell me when?
Oh, I just want to get a couple other reflections before we move on.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I can picture these 2-faced dolls you sometimes see.
Oh.
Yeah, where one face on one side, the other face on the other side. It's kind of like that. That's what I picture when reading this.
Right. So like in actuality, like what it looks like and that's great. The sort of 2-headed dolls.
Yeah.
Right.
What it looks like to me is almost like cat dog.
Cat dog.
Oh, cat dog. It's
Yeah,
a
yeah.
cartoon from Nickelodeon. It's like the cat and the dog together.
Yeah.
What face has this side? What face is the other
Yeah.
side? It's like that basically.
Yeah.
They're stuck together.
Yeah. So
There's another part where it's like you have 2 faces, so I'm imagining literally Two-Face from the comic books, but it's it's like male and
Right, there are definitely some resonances in like pop culture and cartoons about what I mean, like what images could this bring to mind. You had a comment right here. Yeah.
So we know the conventional text where God takes a rib or something from Adam and then turns it into the female. But this is really interesting, stating that to start with, this person had the female within them, both male and female. So it's a kind of an enhancement of when you think about separating them, that, and creating the female, that there were already the parts of the female were so much a part of the person to start with.
Right. I can't help but think about, again, conjoined twins. There are,
That's just what I was thinking about.
yeah. There are a lot of testimonies from folks who are born conjoined to their twins, and at a certain point, if they desire to have a surgery that is safe, to have them sort of uncoupled from one another, like most twins, but even more intensely, there's this like feeling as if you're really missing a part of yourself. Not saying that is everyone's experience, but there's some testimonies from folks who've had the experience. They're like, yeah, I don't feel the same. It was life changing, but something is fundamentally that was a part of me is somehow no longer a part of me, which I think is really I think it's beautiful. Like yeah. Any other thoughts before we move on? No?
Just that Plato's comment about love reminds me of learning the idiom in my Spanish class, media naranja.
Mm-hmm. Can you translate it for everybody in the room?
Media naranja means half of an orange.
Uh-huh.
So like your other half of the orange makes the orange whole.
Uh-huh.
Is your media naranja.
Right.
I was just thinking about that
Nice.
phrase and that image because it's a very similar image.
Right. So Brian was saying it just brought to mind this idea from his Spanish class of media naranja, which means half of an orange. Of like if you can just picture the two oranges and bringing them together in a whole to see what that would. That's a cool visual too. I think that's fun. Great. We're gonna flip the page. We're gonna move on to Avot Rabbi Natan, the source just right in the middle of the page there. If I could have another volunteer read in the English, that would be great. Thank you. Yeah.
When evening began to descend, Adam looked toward the darkening horizon and said, "Woe is me, because I disgraced myself. The Holy Blessed One is bringing darkness upon my world." He did not know that this was simply the way of the world. In the morning, when he saw that the world began to brighten from the east, he felt an overwhelming sense of joy. So he went and he built altars and brought a bull.
Great. Thank you. So what's happening here in this scene? Can you say? Night and day. The first night. Great. So I had never really thought about this idea until recently this past week, which is why when I really learned about this source, which is why I brought it. But just imagine you're created whole with your as an adult, right? It feels very sci-fi. But you don't know anything about the world. And the sky has the sun and clouds, and the sky is full of light. And in a way, you maybe know that you came from darkness and then you're in this light place, right? And then suddenly the sun begins to go down, right? And it's just anxiety provoking because you're like provoking because it's like, oh my God, is the world ending? What's happening? There's something so profound about this world that I just was dropped into that's changing. And there are actually, especially in the ancient Near East, there are stories about the moon and the sun, not just in the ancient Near East, but in like ancient Greece and ancient Rome. There is this tale, I may not remember it all correctly, but from Canaanite religion, where the sun sort of goes down, and there's this belief that it actually moves its way through the underworld and then comes back up. So, sort of ancient peoples were looking at the movements of the sun and the moon, and associating it with life and death. And this is very much what Adam is doing here, right? He's like, oh my God, it's over. I was just born, and we did all this work, and I got to name all these animals, and now it's gonna be over. What aside from what I just said, like how does this land with you? Like, do you have anything additional to add? Because I would love to hear what you all in this room make of this specific midrash.
It reminds me of how my anxiety rises when the internet goes out.
Well, so it reminds him of when his anxiety goes up when the internet goes out.
You know what I mean? Or spectrum outage.
Uh-huh.
You know, it's like an unexplained occurrence happening in my
Right.
life.
It's like a fundamental thing in your life is suddenly no longer available. Right. Yes, please.
Well, and it's similar to this, where Adam says, "What did I do wrong? It must be my fault. I did something wrong."
Mm-hmm.
Do you think, oh, did you do something
No,
wrong?
I'm just
with your
pissed
instinct?
at
Did I
Yeah.
unplug something?
Yeah.
But yeah, Adam must have done something wrong, this is my fault. And
Right.
so then he's especially happy when he sees the sun and it's brightening and, okay,
Yeah.
so everything's okay.
Which is interesting. Just I'll get 1 second, but which is interesting because like Adam's experience. So what was just said is, was what was drawn out was Adam thinks that Adam did something wrong to make this happen. And if you can just imagine your entire experience is there is this all powerful being, and then there are a bunch of animals in this world that all powerful being created, and then there's you, right? It would actually make sense for you to think like, wow, okay, I see power, I see creation all around me. Maybe I have some sort of hand in this. I have some sort of role in this because that's your immediate experience. And of course, this can be, but if we like step back from that aspect of the story, I think it's also very easy for us to sort of take this on in our own lives and be like, what did I do to make this happen? And it could just be that there was a spectrum outage, and like, no matter how much you unplug or plug in your modem, it's just not gonna get fixed, and you just have to say, all right, this is out of my hands. Great, you had a.
It's actually a reflection on the human condition that persists to this day.
Mm-hmm.
So anxiety around the time of sundown
Mm-hmm.
is a real condition. You see it with babies,
Mm-hmm.
they get colicky around sundown time.
Mm-hmm.
You see it with elderly folks and folks with dementia. It's literally called sundown.
Right.
And so there is this kind of human condition to get almost primal, to become anxious when the sun is set, is gone, it's getting dark out.
Right. So there's this primal anxiety that is even expressed through this term and perhaps a condition called sundowning in human beings. I'm just repeating everything because of that. Yeah. That can cause, a cascade of specific reactions or anxiety. Oftentimes it can affect people's memory depending on what's going on in their body and their minds, which is such an interesting thing to bring up right now because we're in the midst of getting used to the clocks changing again. I know I couldn't believe by the time I woke up from my nap, I was like, I gotta go back already, and by the time the sun goes down, I know that I turn into a pumpkin, but it does. It changes the way in which our minds and bodies operate, which is interesting. Yeah, and Joey, then we're gonna move on.
Yeah, to expand on what she was saying, there's also another thing called SAD, seasonal affective disorder.
Seasonal affective disorder, right?
Which happens to some people. They get depressed because of reduced hours of sunlight, especially starting this time of the year.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But it's worse. Obviously, it's worse the farther north or south of the equator you are.
Right. So a sort of another kind of conditional thing brought up that there's this thing called seasonal affective disorder that can really impact folks when the seasons change, for I think typically for the worse, right? If I'm understanding that correctly.
When we get to the winter solstice, especially.
Right.
It's easier to notice.
Right. And it's interesting because in those moments I think we come back to the question like, would it be beneficial to have somebody else around during that time? I mean, I'm getting a nods in the room. It'd be like, yeah, you probably shouldn't be alone in those moments, right? Like, probably shouldn't be sitting alone with that existential dread or sudden dip in mood because something's happening around you that's changing your inner life. And my teacher, Rabbi Candice Levy, who teaches our Pirkei Avot class, brought sort of an additional interpretation to this midrash. Excuse me, I gotta stop drinking the coffee up here. Midrash, and I just thought it was so beautiful. So her take on this story was that what Adam really needed in this moment of anxiety was someone to just sit there with him, and it's as simple as that, right? When we talk about visiting the sick, Bikur Cholim, which is a mitzvah to visit the sick, there's this idea that when we simply spend time with them, we have the capacity to take on or relieve them of 1/60th of their pain, right? It's this number. It's a very like halachic number that sort of kind of comes out of nowhere, but it speaks to this idea of like we don't always have to know what to say or how to say it, but simply just being present can be enough to change the course of someone's day, someone's week, someone's night in this particular case. And then she added that Adam was anxiety ridden about this darkness, right? This darkness, the first night he's ever experienced. And then Eve or Chava is there she points up, she's like, but do you see all these stars? Do you see all this light? Do you see all this light in the darkness? And it speaks a little bit of what Diego was saying earlier about how when there are going to be some days where we can kind of do it all, where we can sort of see the light, we can see the stars, we can see the sun and really take it all in. Then there are going to be other days where we really can't. And it's helpful to have somebody there who hopefully can sort of share that burden with us, share that load with us and say, like, actually, I hear what you're saying. And it's a very real experience, but like what I'm seeing right now is I'm seeing stars. And maybe you don't see that right now, but maybe I can help you see it. And if not, maybe we can just sit here together. And I would like to move to just this last source here. So this is from Tehillim, from Psalms, and it's a song that I'm sure that a lot of us know. And the Hebrew is Hine ma tov u'manayim shevet achim gam yachad. How good and pleasant it is for people to dwell together. It translates achim as brothers because that's what it literally means. I'm going to translate it as people. And Rashi comments on this and basically says, when people dwell together, God also dwells with them, right? So this being together, this sitting with one another, is actually a really holy act, and it can seem so simple. We're in this moment where so many folks are we're asking ourselves, what can we do, if anything at all? And sometimes the answer is just sit together, and that's that. You know, ask ourselves what's within our power and what's without our power, and say, maybe I just need to be present, and I don't need to think about saying the right thing or the wrong thing. It could just be that it's not good for a person to be alone, whatever it is that they're experiencing in this very moment, and I should call on people in those moments to be with me, and they should call on me to be with them. And with that, I want to just close and just thank you for engaging in this learning. It was a real pleasure to hear everything